Yes, I think just though sticking with schools then and moving forward away from your own experiences then and looking at, if you like, a contrast. What are the when you look at Japan, when you look at the education in China or whatever, what are the main contrasts that you see then between what you've experienced? And I think although it's different in some respects, I think it still resonates as somebody who's worked in education as well. It seems that what you're saying is you could still characterize a lot of what we're doing in schools as that kind of thing, although it's not quite in the same way. But how would it contrast then if we went further to the Indian or the setting or the Chinese or the Japanese settings?
Well, English middle class education is meant to be a generic education. It's meant to be an education not particularly of mental skills, but of character. It's to train you to, because our social structure has been so complex for such a long time, there's no way that a school teacher or university teacher can predict what you are going to do when you go on to your life. It's meant to be a general grounding in logic and approaches to life and building up your character. So it diversifies into all these parts of your personality. In China, particularly, education is in some ways much more important. Confucian education for 2,000 years has been the absolute backbone. If you had to locate something in each civilization, in India, religion, in America, economics, and so on, in China, the backbone of the civilization is education. That is to say, they don't have a proper class system or caste system or anything. Apart from families and communities, the thing that integrates China is the language, the written language. And the thing that structures it instead of a class is educational attainment. So for many, many centuries, you have allocated people within the power structure of China through how well they do through a meritocratic educational system. Everyone has a bit of basic education and then takes some exams. If they pass them, 1 in 1,000 passes, they go to the next level. 1 in 1,000 passes, they go to the next level. And so when you have 100 million people, a few thousand get up to be top mandarins at the court of the emperor. But other ones are placed at local levels. That meant that education was absolutely central. And it was a particular kind of education. In most civilizations, we tend to think of education, as I explained to Lily, as something to train our minds and to question and to discover and to fit us for solving problems. That isn't the point of education in 90% of societies. If you look at traditional Islamic educational in a madrasa, or you look at Buddhist education in a Buddhist school, you will see people reciting scriptures. They are learning the religious truths, because in most civilizations, everything important was laid out 2,000 years ago by the Mahatma or the prophet or whoever, Confucius. There's nothing new to learn under the sun. What education is to teach, to turn each little child into a walking library of the classics. In Chinese education, you learnt the great classics off by heart, and you learnt a very precise way of answering questions about them, in which you went through a very strict form of essay and reproduced as clearly as possible and with as little deviation, but some minimal distinguishing features which gave it a special touch, what you had learnt by rote learning. So education in China, and to a considerable extent in India and elsewhere traditionally, was very repetitive and not at all creative. You might learn poetry and other things separately and you learnt the great poets. But on the whole, it was just repetitive memory work. And that tradition has really partly continued. Having worked with a number of Chinese students and friends, and I did a comparative study of Chinese and English education, and I've written a book with one of the leading Chinese educationalists about the comparison between Chinese and English education. And there's a huge amount of reform going on, and there are many Chinese children at Western schools. And so it's opening up hugely. But until a few years ago, basically, it was just about one of those four things. Nothing about the body, nothing about the spirit. There was no religion or anything in Confucian education. Nothing about the heart, because it was arranged marriage and so on. Just this part. So the Chinese imagined education as stopping here.
And one of the things, just to interject, one of the things that you noted was a difference, probably because of this education, again, as a contrast, between the early innovators in England, the really educated people who were also scientists and engineers, and they were doing experiments themselves, whereas the Mandarin class in China didn't do that kind of thing. And so that was probably one of the reasons why perhaps they didn't develop in the same way as the Industrial Revolution people did.
Well, this